switch here.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, good.
So I'm gonna have Brandon speak for a little bit. One of the most beautiful things about starting this church and seeing people's growth as the church has gone on is just watching people's walk with Christ and how it's just going further and further. I never knew Brandon before the church, and it's just awesome the people that God is bringing to this building. And we are the church. It's not necessarily a building, but us as a community, we are the church. So I'm just gonna have Brandon speak for a little bit, and I'll get up and say it and do some preaching. So everybody, this is Brandon.
Brother.
Well, yeah, I got brought here by Louis. It's all Louis' fault.
Thank you.
Always a great guy. You know, I've been searching for a place to go, you know, and just trying to, you know, be open and try out different churches. You know what I mean? But my walk with God started a really long time ago, man. When I was born in 1992. My parents split when I was about 2 years old, and at the time they were living in Germany. And so when they split, we moved back to the United States and moved in with my mom's parents, my grandparents. So my grandfather basically kind of became like a really big father figure for me. And I remember early on in life, my earliest memories are like right in the back of their car to different churches on Sunday because he was a pastor and a colonel in the military. And we would go to multiple churches early on in life. And that's pretty much like all my beginning memories are in different churches in the Deep South, somewhere in Tennessee or North Carolina. And like I have one memory of being like way up in the rafters. It was really, I think somebody had died. And I remember not really being aware of that. I just knew we were going to church, and I just remember sitting like up in the balcony, looking past all these like velvet chairs and down on the bottom floor, and there was a casket in the middle of the floor, and there was just a bunch of people there. I just had like that image in my mind. And so anyway, long story short, you know, my grandfather and my grandmother were a very big part of my life, and the church was a very big part of my life. I was an okay child for a couple of years, but quickly became a very rebellious, and kind of like, I don't know, I guess like the right word would be like selfish, right? I started to pick my own way, and got very defensive about that. And so I walked away from God. I walked away from pretty much everything. You know, I wanted to find myself, trying to figure out, you know, what was going on, what was going to work for me. About the age of 12, I got introduced to smoking cigarettes, and then shortly after I started drinking alcohol, and you know, I started partying and having fun and, you know, doing that and not really thinking about God, whereas like God had been an everyday thing for my life. I think this went on for well over a decade. I never really like fully let go. I think one of the main things that pushed me the furthest away from God throughout my like early life was when my grandmother died. She was like, you know, not my mother, but just one of the closest people to my heart, and you know, one of the nicest people that I ever knew, and that really hit me hard, and it drove me and my grandfather apart. That's how I kind of ended up in Florida. I moved back down here to move back in with my mom. We were remarried, and you know, my stepfather's a great father figure. I think if only every woman in the world could have a husband like my father, my stepfather, it'd be a better place. But I was a very ignorant and selfish person for the majority of my life. You know, I had so many things going for me, but I like a dog returning to its vomit. I kept wanting to do something my own way. You know, whether it made sense or not. So, you know, after the death of my grandmother and my grandfather, it really kind of like tore the roof off of everything, and it gave me like the perfect excuse to just start sprinting in the opposite direction. And you know, many years went by, and my using and drinking got worse and worse and worse to, you know, where I was just a daily drinker, man. You know, just all day. I didn't necessarily drink at work, but once I got home and, you know, until I passed out, that was what I was doing. It's really interesting to think about because it places us roughly in like 2000, from 2012 to 2017. In 2012, I was doing some really bad drugs, and by the grace of God, made it out with my life. I don't know what it was. It was just like God possessed me or moved me in a direction, but I just suddenly got up one day and I was like, man, I can't do this. Like, I know exactly where this goes, and but I didn't stop drinking, you know. So this even though I was like going back and forth between right and wrong decisions, it was still messed up for so long. And then it spits us out into 2017, where I kind of had this come to Jesus moment for the umpteenth time, but with a very distinct and different flavor. I've been working for over like 10 years at this point, and I'd either gotten fired or I quit, or something other happened. I always ended up never getting my vacation time every place that I worked. So after like a decade, I'm working at a bar on St. Pete. I'd been there for like 3 months, one of the most debaucherous periods of my life, just down for anything, because I was sleeping on couches, and it's just, I don't know, it was an easier way to live, to be okay with whatever other people were doing, and allowed me to exist there. And that lasted for like 3 months before I kind of like snapped finally after all of this like wayward walk. I didn't like where I was. I was making the most money I've ever made in my life, and I had about like 3 checks in my pocket, and I said, you know what? I've never taken a vacation like my whole working life, over a decade. I'm gone. And so I got in at the time I was driving a Chevy Cruze. I got in that Chevy Cruze, and after my shift that night, I drove all the way up to, I've been talking to an ex-girlfriend of mine, all the way up to Tennessee. And I met her in a parking lot of a Waffle House at like 3 a.m. in the morning. And it was, I think I spent like 3 months in Tennessee. And eventually went up to like Michigan. When I came back on my way down, I started to run out of money. So I came back down to Tennessee, and my ex-girlfriend was really nice. She gave me her apartment basically to like stay in, because she was dating some other guy, and so she was over with him, and I was staying in this apartment. This apartment was in the basement of a 120-year-old house in the middle of Tennessee, up in the Cumberland Mountains. And there was just something very, like, this was the last place I ever spent with my grandparents and felt like really close to God. This is where I felt like everything went wrong, right? And so what I find weird is that my intention was not to go have a religious moment. My intention was, I am tired of all this, none of this is working, I've got to get out of here, but I'm not going to change anything about myself, and spirituality and faith had nothing to do with it at first. And I love that God used this desperate decision of mine to just it was like a running into a wall, without seeing it. Like I was driving 150 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, bam, just God is right there. I'm sitting where we spread some of my grandmother's ashes, and I just kind of broke down and started crying, and kind of ruminating on everything that had gone wrong, and just all the time, and thinking about my relationship with God. I had a conversation with my ex-girlfriend's father, who was kind of like the pastor figure of their family. They had an in-house church, and he asked me, he's like, are you saved?